Welcome to episode 31 of Leading People with me, Jerry Murray. This episode is brought to you by Wide Circle, helping you make better talent decisions. To learn more, visit widecircle.eu, that's WIDECIRCLE.eu. Do you have high performers on your team? How would you feel if they went to work for your competitors? I guess you'd prefer if they stayed and worked with you. So, how do you create the conditions so people can thrive, enjoy what they're doing, and perform at their best? These are just some of the topics I covered in my conversation with this week's guest, Paul Zak. Apart from having a TED Talk with nearly 2 million views, Paul has written 2 best-selling books and there's a third one on the way. He is also the founding director of the Center for Neuroeconomic Studies and a professor of economics, psychology and management at Claremont Graduate University in California. His former colleagues included renowned scholars such as the late Peter Drucker and Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. During our conversation, Paul explains what he's learned from his extensive research and provides tangible tips and advice that any of us can implement straight away. So, let's dive right in and learn more. Paul Zak, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Jerry.
Well, this is one of those adventures getting us both synced up in time, given that you're coming in from the west coast of the US and I'm just outside Brussels. But we've made it, and that's a great thing. So some of the listeners may have watched your famous TED Talk or read some of your books, and perhaps many others haven't yet. So how did you get here, Paul? Is there some sort of person, place, or an event that stands out on your journey to where you are today? Or was there some sort of epiphany moment that kind of said, this is my destiny, I'm going to work in this field of what I believe you shaped as neuroeconomics? So perhaps off you go. Let our listeners know a little bit about you.
I'm a Martian, so I don't really understand the humans. And I run a behavioral neuroscience laboratory at Claremont Graduate University, where I'm a professor. And we run experiments that measure brain activity while humans and sometimes animals make decisions. So in particular, my own pathology, Jerry, is understanding social behaviors. I'm making jokes here, of course, but there's this old saying that all research is me-search. There's maybe a reason I study things like empathy and charity. Maybe I was deficient. But our lab, as you suggested, identified for the first time this mammalian neurochemical oxytocin as a key signal, neurochemical signal in the human brain that tells us that people around us, particularly strangers, appear to be trustworthy, safe, okay to be around and interact with. And so we spent about 20 years really developing tools to understand how this molecule activates a much larger circuit in the brain that underlies appropriate social behaviors. And, we all live around other humans, and it is shocking that, we can walk through Brussels or Dublin or New York City and not be murdered. If you think about it, because that's what chimpanzees would do. If you pop a chimpanzee into a different part of the jungle and they're all unknown, they just kill each other. So we do that, humans do that, but actually fairly rarely compared to lots of other animals. And so the question is why? And so we spent a lot of time studying the underlying neural drivers of good behaviors in humans, and that led into work on morality, led to work on high-performance teams. So teams are humans behaving really well together, and recently led to work on extraordinary experiences. And most of the things that give us happiness and create high quality of life are social experiences.
There's quite a lot to unpack there just to get us started. I will confess that I worked in this field around personal professional development for quite a number of years, and I was doing a lot of stuff that was working, and it was about 6 years ago I went off and actually formally studied neuroscience. I was kind of lucky, I think, because as you'll probably attest to, an awful lot has happened in the last 15, 20 years in terms of quality research. And isn't it strange, just taking your point about how humans function, it's strange, this sort of part of our anatomy that kind of guides a lot of what we do and how we react to the world around us, that we don't actually, it doesn't get formally taught. People stumble on it by accident. Some people have more intuitive sense of how their brains work, but I know that people like yourself are trying to bring that message out to help people understand it better. And of course, where we're going to head to in this conversation is bring it into the world of work, where it can have this type of understanding can have huge benefits and impact for people. Isn't that right?
Yeah, not only understanding, but now measurement technologies. And so a lot of my recent work in the last 5 years has been creating technologies that anybody can use to measure brain activity so that you don't have to talk to specialists or have kind of synthetic, general statements. So I do think it's changing the way we think. So, we have all of us who took Economics 101 absorbed this notion, as the kids would say, work sucks. It sucks so bad I have to pay you and monitor you. So economists call this the disutility of labor. But if you look at human neuroanatomy, what you see is that we are hypersensitive to social information, and we need to be around the other humans, right? We do not survive and certainly don't thrive on our own, at least not for very long. So that changes the whole way we think about work. Humans want to be in teams, and we want to have an objective for that team. So if you think about hanging out with your friends, you can hang out at the pub and just, chat. But at least for a lot of my friends, we like to do stuff. We like to play a game. We like to do a sport. We like to go hiking. Doing something, having a goal is a reason for that team to kind of bond together. Nothing wrong with going to the pub, of course. I enjoy it myself. But, having that goal. And our brains are designed to work in groups towards goals. And so that is a whole different conceptualization of work. That work is not this place where it's so awful that I have to pay you to do this terrible task. It's a place where, at least from the data I've seen, that people get more satisfaction on average from work than from leisure time. Because at work, we have challenges, we have a team, we have people we're working with. So once we start thinking about that, we can go one step further and ask, how might I organize the workplace so that people are performing at the highest levels and gaining the satisfaction from knowing they've done something important?
Fantastic. So let's get there, but I'd like to go to get to the new research and the new book. You wrote a great book several years ago. It was 2017 or something, called The Trust Factor. I'm holding it up here, where you actually cleverly took the word oxytocin as both a mnemonic and as an acronym, and you explained a model at that stage that was based around this concept of psychological safety and trust. And can we start a little bit with that, and how that then has evolved into the new book, which is, by the way, for our listeners, what's the new book called?
It's called Immersion: The Science of the Extraordinary and the Source of Happiness. Let's talk.
So let's evolve this, because what comes out very strongly after this pandemic, and people are reevaluating: do I want to work here? How do I want to work? A lot of people felt their organizations perhaps didn't really understand them or treat them properly. Trust comes up over and over and over again, etc., etc. So let's demystify some of this for our people out there into some sort of tangible layman's speak, where they can really get their heads around practical things, because what your acronym is based on really practical stuff. And then let's get into this world of the immersion and neural job crafting and all that wonderful stuff.
Great. Several famous people have said that the war for talent is over. Talent has won. So even before the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw labor shortages around the world, including in developing countries like Mexico. So there's a shortage of bodies at work, and that means there's a shortage of high performance potential employees. So if I have a high performer, I want him or her to continue to work for me and not work for you. So how might I do that? There's a couple ways. We can do the golden cage. I can just pay you a ton of money. What we know neurologically and behaviorally is that people acclimate to increases in salary pretty quickly, and it really doesn't affect their performance. Or we can think about the dimension I work on, which is creating an atmosphere at work where I'm doing hard but important things with a team of people that I can trust and that depend on me. And what we found in this 12 years of research or so on high performance teams, which includes laboratory experiments as well as lots of experiments in businesses, field experiments, is that we can actually create the conditions for high performance, and these conditions are repeatable. In other words, it's not just a one-time drop-in. I can actually create a culture, if you will, of high performance. And as you said, the kind of key punchlines are number one, the precursor for high performance is establishing psychological safety. And then the second is creating an environment of interpersonal trust. And when we look at the data from companies that have done that, randomly with my help, whatever, they perform much, much better on multiple business dimensions than companies that don't. And those employees are much more satisfied with their jobs. They're more likely to stay in those organizations, and they produce more as well. So that tells us that this human dimension is so valuable. And as you sort of suggested in your intro, Jerry, we sort of think, well, it's hard to measure that. It's super vague. What does psychological safety really mean? What does trust mean? Well, we developed ways to measure that. And so once it's measurable from a leadership perspective, it's certainly manageable. And just the bottom line of that is trust means giving people more autonomy, giving them a chance to experiment, to innovate, to get feedback. It doesn't mean there's no leadership, but we see that these high trust organizations have fewer levels of management, more accountability, more ownership of what individual employees are doing, and greater discretionary effort. And so this is a kind of I can give you lots of examples of this, but this is a way to kind of tap into what I said earlier, this human desire to work as a team, to have a goal, and to feel good when I reach that goal. So it doesn't mean that we can't have really large organizations, but what we see in a lot of these companies is that they break down that large organization into smaller units. So concrete example, W.R. Gore company, very well-run company, makes Gore-Tex and the other chemicals, like for coats and lots of things. And they limit their size of their office and factories to 250 people. So their data suggests that that's about the most you can keep track of. And there's actually evidence in evolutionary biology for 300 being about the max that we can maintain, called the Dunbar number for the nerds out there. And so, if that office is growing or that factory is growing, we just cleave one off and make another one. So that way, again, we have this fewer layers of management. At W.R. Gore, there are only 3 layers of management: super top management, the middle folks, and then everybody else. That's it. It's not 14 layers, right? Mm-hmm. Because they've broken it down to smaller units. So I know who's working for me. I know their names. I know what's happening with them. So you can see a theme in the work we've talked about. Sorry for the long answer, Jerry, but I think my professional purpose, even though it was being a little funny in the beginning, has really been to create knowledge and technologies so that people can curate their lives for greater happiness. And when employees are happier with what they're doing, they just perform better. It's human nature.
Yeah. I mean, I always used to say to people, I don't know very many people who go to work to do a bad job. Right. But sometimes they go to work and let's take SH1T happens around them. The context perhaps doesn't help them to perform at their best. And then you see an industry of millions, if not billions of dollars and euros not spent on engaging people at work. And my question always is, how do you manage to disengage them? Because if you've ever met somebody who got a new job down the pub, as we talked about earlier, on a Friday evening, they're celebrating. They're going, I met these cool people. I'm looking forward to starting my job next week. And you meet them 6 months or a year later, and they're going, everything sucks around there. You can't believe this. You can't believe that. So what are the conditions? Now, you've talked about smaller groups of people because, of course, this is all related to how our brains evolved and what we seek and how our biology functions. What other things have you learned that are really practical things that seem to work quite well in organizations to help people be safe enough, because then, of course, they release all those great positive chemicals in their brain, which makes them more creative and everything. So what other practical things? Because I'm sure there's people out there going, come on, Paul, give us a bit more tangibles here, because there must be some great managers out there and HR folks not wanting more.
So that's why I had this acronym I created, as you mentioned, oxytocin. And so I'll just go through a couple of those. The O is for ovation, the first O. One is just to celebrate victories, right? And that's team victories and personal victories. And so, I feel like this is what we learned in first grade, say please and thank you, right? No yelling, no demanding, right? Instead of saying, we have a new client, I need someone to take care of it. Hey, Jerry, I need you to do this. I'm like, hey, Jerry, do you have time to pick up this new client? Because he's in an area you know really well. And let's talk about how, this would be just like right in your wheelhouse. That's a different conversation. Remember, the war for talent's over. Talent's won. You're the talent. What I'm doing is I'm a coach, right? I'm a servant leader. I'm creating opportunities for you to flourish and shine and feel satisfied with what you've done. I'm not a dictator, right? So if you want to live in the dictatorial world, that's a word in which people do exactly what you said. You go to the pub after a couple of months, you go, man, I hate these people. Like, I got to look for a new job. You're watching the clock. And I've had bosses that yelled at me, and I don't respond to yelling. Like, give me a hard problem, I'll work on it. I'll work all night on it. Don't yell at me. That's your issue, dude. So what we want to do is, again, give people challenges and then recognize when those challenges are met. So listeners will go, well, it's just like, business 101. But the neuroscience gives you specific ways to get a bigger impact on brain and behavior. So that recognition should come close in time to when the goal was met or exceeded. So close in time neurologically means a week or less. So that means we're constantly doing these, what I call ovations. The second is they're more powerful when they're done publicly. They're more powerful when they're unexpected. They're more powerful when they come from peers. They're more powerful when they're tangible. They're more powerful when they're personal. So I want to give a concrete example. Those are lots of words. So, Jerry, you finish a big project with this client. You finished it on time. The client's super happy. And then our next all-hands meeting on Monday, I come in because I know you love good coffee. And where I live, the best coffee is from this company called Intelligentsia. So I get you a nice basket of Intelligentsia coffee and some rolls. I said, hey, Jerry, I want to recognize what you did. You really killed it. Our clients are happy, on time, on budget. And now we use this ovation for one other piece of information, which is, how did you do it? Tell about us. So now you get to shine a little bit. You get to tell us, but we also get to learn about best practice, right? So this project went off so well. So this constant sharing. Now you can see if you say something that I say the boss don't like, and you're going to get berated for it, you're not going to share. So that's where the psychological safety and trust come in. We're going to create an environment where everybody's voice is valuable. And listeners are going to go, man, I'm damn busy. I don't have time for that. I got to bring in revenue. I got to ship out product or services. Like, listening to people, just do your damn job. And I used to think that way, right? I used to think, no whining, just get it done. Don't ask me questions, just do your damn job. And what I found was, from a management perspective, didn't work at all. And then I started running experiments to figure out why. And it's why because humans are social creatures, and we want that social inclusion. We want that recognition. We want to be celebrated when we put in extra effort. Just like with your kids, right? If your kids come home with an A on their test and said, hey, Dad, I got an A, you're like, really? Another A? Who gives a crap about that? Right? That would be so discouraging for those kids. And first of all, you'd be such a bad parent. But we do that to employees all the time, right? You work your ass off. You finish this project, and then you give it to your boss. And he's like, oh, whatever. I pay you to do that. You should do that. Yeah, and at some level, that's correct. But that doesn't tap into our human social nature, which is, man, my team worked on this. And by the way, when we do these, I've done hundreds of these ovation debriefs where someone's recognized publicly and tangibly. And inevitably, the person being recognized, the team leader, always talks about his team. So as social creatures, we almost never say, unless you really have a psychopathology, I am the most amazing human you've ever seen, and, I could do this with standing on my head all day long. Now, what people say, healthy people say, is, this is a huge project. It was hard, and Bob helped me and Sue helped me, and we almost lost a week's worth of data, and we found out that Rahul knows how to save data, and Rahul saved us. And so now, again, we're learning about best practice. We're learning about who we can call for different things. The client changed the parameters of what we were doing, and then Susan called him, and we got that clarified, and Susan's amazing on the phone. The client was so happy we checked in. So again, we're sharing this information, but again, it requires that these individuals are owning what they're doing, that they're accepting what they're doing. And then just one more thing, Jerry, real quick. Again, you asked a short question. I'm giving you a very long answer, but I'm trying to be useful here. Is building in those challenges. So the brain acclimates to what we're doing, and brain just wants to cruise. I don't want to spend the energy on things. So from a leadership perspective, we do want to give people challenge goals. It feels very rewarding from the brain perspective to have a goal, do something that you haven't done before, and then achieve that goal. Right. So from a leadership perspective, it means that you need to push your people. So I mentioned the word happiness before, but the neuroscience shows that I don't want you to be happy at work. I want you to be focused. I want you to be really in. So you're not thinking about social media or whatever. And at the end of the day, I want you to feel satisfied. So the good feeling comes from, and what we find in the data is that employees who work in high trust organizations shed the work of stress much more rapidly than those in low trust organizations. So I'm in, and then when it's done, I'm done. I've done my work. It's 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever. I let it go. I go home. Right. And so that's the way to keep employees healthy, keep them working, even in, fields like investment banking and, junior law associates, the kind of classic 100-hour weeks, those are all gone. They've been gone for quite a while, at least in the U.S., because it wasn't sustainable. And, if there's a surplus of people around who want those jobs, maybe you can abuse people for a short period of time. But it's not good for anybody. It seems like I have more billable hours. That's a good thing for my organization, and I'll get a raise or a promotion. No, actually what happens is you do crappy work. Right. And so nobody's happy. And you, the employee, are not happy either, because this is not enjoyable. I'm just doing half-assed work. So I'm losing that excitement, as you said, of starting this new job, doing cool stuff. And even, Jerry, if you talk, we talk about, at the pub, what do we talk about? Boys or girls and movies, and then talk about work. So we look at what people talk about in their leisure time. We spend a lot of time talking about work because those are where we have a lot of challenges and a chance to grow and learn and do something that's important. And so let's not downgrade that. So I don't think there's a work-life balance. I think there's work-life integration. And we're certainly seeing this now with the hybrid work schedules, telecommuting, that certainly was accelerated with the lockdowns in the last couple of years, where pre-COVID, the data showed that people who worked at home worked an extra hour per day than people who went into the office. So some of that is saving time from commuting. Some of it is shorter lunches, because if I'm having lunch by myself, I'm not, going out chit-chatting. And there's real important reasons to be in the office, and we can certainly spend some time talking about that if you would like. But from a trust and psychological safety perspective, I'm working at home. I got stuff to do. I have milestones. I have challenges that my boss has given me. And I want to meet those challenges. So as you said, no one really wants to do a crummy job at work, or very few people. Every once in a while I get one of those, and they're easy to fire. I don't even lose a second of thought. Like, you're a slacker, man. I don't know how you talked me into hiring you, but you got to go.
Yeah.
It's rare.
Yeah. So if I'm not mistaken, was the late Mihai Csikszentmihalyi one of your colleagues?
He was, dear colleague.
And he was the famous guy, because you talk about the challenge, and to not oversimplify his work, he had this great thing about the challenge being sufficiently challenging and the resources being perceived to be available to meet the challenge, which is what gave people this sense of flow, right? And if I read, you sent me a little bit of a précis of your new book, just a little bit of a flavor of what's in it. And I start to see how you're getting into the more tangible measurement of stuff like this. Could you talk about this immersion and how people who are allowed, because the autonomy thing is so important, how people who are allowed to immerse themselves in their work not only become more productive, but then you get into this concept of mastery. Like, we all want our people to be. I mean, I was on a call with a client this morning with a colleague, and they referred to myself and the colleague as masters of the stuff,
Wow.
because the client is using some stuff we've given them. And my colleague afterwards said to me, "Did you hear what they said to us?" And I said, "Yeah, it was great, wasn't it?" And he goes, "Yeah, they called us masters." So tell us a little bit more about this immersion and this, the whole link to productivity and happiness and mastery and all the great things that come off the back of that. In the next part of our conversation, we go deeper into the concept of immersion and how it differs from flow. We find out about something Paul calls the neurological signature of extraordinary experiences. We learn how immersion improves teamwork and also how to measure both immersion and psychological safety, and much more. So, lots to look forward to.
Right. So we've done work for, again, about 15 years, kind of other work, looking at the neurologic signature of extraordinary experiences. So that could be something I'm doing by myself, watching an amazing movie, or generally something I'm doing with other people. It could be rock climbing. It could be watching a Super Bowl TV commercial. So any of those things could be extraordinary experiences. And this work was actually funded by the U.S. military and some other agencies of the U.S. government that you might guess, that wanted us to identify signals in the brain that would tell us or would predict what people would do after a message or an experience, right? And so those extraordinary experiences provoke action, and they're highly satisfying. So again, those are correlates of effective teamwork, effective organizations. And so we, over many published studies, identified this neurologic state, which I call immersion, which has two key components. One is I'm attending to what I'm doing. And, we use the term pay attention, and that's exactly what it is. As I said earlier, the brain's very costly to run at full speed. It just wants to idle. So if I'm going to be a really effective and productive team member, I've got to actually step on the gas in my brain. And so the first part of that, stepping on the gas, is to pay attention, pay metabolic cost to attend to what I'm doing and not be distracted by other things. But most of the variation over time in immersion is due to what I call emotional resonance. And this is driven by the brain's production of oxytocin, in which I'm tagging this experience as emotionally important to me. And when I do that, I recruit a lot of neural resources so that I am kind of embedded in this experience, and it becomes memorable, it becomes valuable. And it is similar, it may be thought of as the neural substrate immersion for the flow state you mentioned earlier that Mike Csikszentmihalyi first developed. The difference between immersion and flow is a couple things. Immersion is a neurologic state. It varies second by second. We can measure it passively, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But at least in Csikszentmihalyi's original conception of flow, that had to be an active task where you can be immersed in a passive task, like watching a movie. So because I'm a Martian, I like to actually observe the humans. And I've noticed that, not you and me, Jerry, because we're too macho, but that occasionally in movie theaters, at the end of the movie, when the boy gets the girl or the girl dies, people cry. So neurologically, that's really interesting, right? You're cognitively intact. You're not on drugs. You're aware of where you are. You know this is a fictional story. You know these are paid actors. And yet people cry at the end of a movie. So that's immersion in that experience. So you've actually absorbed that social experience, and your brain is treating it as if that's happening to you. So when that happens at work, we see the same thing. We see that people are really effective team members. They are in tune empathically with their other colleagues. They understand why you're doing what you're doing, and you see very efficient and satisfying work come out of that. So as I said, building in challenges is important, but then once you have those challenges, once you've acclimated to that level of expertise, when you're a master, then I need to give you a new challenge. And so this is not every day. The brain needs to recover. So I don't want to challenge you every second of every day. I want to give you some recovery time and then come back. So think about weekly or every other week, bi-weekly challenges. Great way for employees. And then discuss that, right? This is about a coaching model from a leadership perspective. So this is amazing. Now you've really learned how to, use this, new database we built. What we're going to do now is have you learn how to integrate that database with our CRM software, right? So you're going to take Salesforce and you're going to match it to all our data on our previous engagements, and we're going to learn about why clients use us over and over. We're going to learn how to serve them better. We're going to learn how to upsell them so they have more services, on and on and on, right? So whatever I just said sounds, I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm making this up, but it sounds really hard. Salesforce is damn hard to use. If you guys have used it, it's hard. So integrating another piece of software into Salesforce, oh man, that's tough. That's a challenge. Now, if I have coaching, if I have someone, a master who can show me how to do this, who can work with me, again, we don't work well alone generally. We tend to work in teams. Like, holy crap, I spent a month on this, and now I am the master of this thing. So our brain wants us to continue doing these things. So the real innovation here, Jerry, as you foreshadowed, is that we've developed technologies over the last 5 years that allow anybody to measure neurologic immersion in real time, any place people are doing interesting things, by using an app we created for my company, Immersion Neuroscience, that sits on smartwatches and fitness sensors. And we wrote code that lives in the cloud that lets us take the input from that smartwatch, in this case, heart rate. We don't care about that at all, but we can actually infer what the brain's doing from very subtle changes in the way the heart rhythms arrive. And so, again, this is just lots of science, lots of math, but it means that from a management perspective, I have a tool now to ask who is most immersed in which tasks, what days of the week, when are you ready? So immersion is going to be lower when you've mastered that task. When are you ready for a new challenge? When do you need some recovery time? So we also measure psychological safety physiologically. I think we're the first people to do this. And so I can also ask, is my culture resonating for the people here? Are people comfortable in the office? And think about coming back to the office after these 2 years of lockdowns, right? There are going to be people who are going to be comfortable doing that immediately, other people who are not going to be comfortable. But we've got to make a workplace that includes everybody, that is a reason to go into the office. So again, I've made a case that autonomy is great, but that doesn't mean that people should only work from their home and never interact with the other humans that they work with, because if I interact with you in the real 3D world, I get much more information than the 2D world you and I are in now. So when we think about return to the office, I've got to think about, well, geez, everything changed over the last 2 years. And even with diverse workforces, like, how do we make sure that everybody feels comfortable here? And that's the first thing. That's the precursor to everything else, to productivity, to job retention, to job satisfaction. Even things like fewer sick days we found are associated with high psychological safety. And so if I want to be effective and run this high performance team, I've got to monitor them not only from a productivity or behavioral perspective, but I've got to monitor them from an emotional perspective. So I can do that with technology now. People can just Google me, or you can do what I call an emotional check-in, right? So in that coaching model that I'm advocating, that kind of daily huddle, I can just do, in our, I like the 5-minute daily stand-up with my team. I just love going one-on-one and just quick. It's 3 questions. What did you do yesterday? What's your goal today? What do you need help with? That's all. Now add one more question, which is, hey, Jerry, how you feeling today? And it's even better if you can put in an adjective. Hey, Jerry, you look, feeling the adjective. Happy, tired, worried, sad, joyful. Right now I'm opening up this channel for emotional information from you that you may want to share or may not want to share, but I'm signaling that I see you as a human being and not a piece of human capital. If you're human capital, you're replaceable like a machine, and you're not inherently valuable as a member of the human species. If I see you as a human being, then I'm saying, look, I care about you as the whole person, right? I care about your personal life. Because if your personal life sucks, let's be honest, you're not going to be great at work. And if your work life sucks, by the way, your personal life also is going to suck. So, again, this is the work-life integration. We've got to think about this and have those conversations. As I said, I'm a really selfish bastard. I want my high performers working for me and not for my competitors. So I want to do what I can to keep them engaged, keep them understanding that I know them well. So for people I've worked with, maybe for you too, Jerry, like for 10 years and plus, I tell them I love them all the time, all the time. And they know what I mean in the philia sense, right? Not a weird thing. I'm old, so I can do it. Doesn't no one's threatened by that. I'm like, hey, George, I love you, man. You're just doing amazing work. 10 years you've been working with me. Man, what a privilege it is to have you work with me. Think how good you would feel. Again, you have to make sure that's appropriate in your workplace. But you can say, look, I really appreciate you or I really care about you. You don't have to use the word love if that's uncomfortable. But imagine if we got that feedback from ourselves. We get it from our spouses and our kids. What if your boss or your colleagues just had an appreciation for you, not for something that you did? So it's getting that ovation idea I talked about earlier, but just for you as being an amazing human. So 30 more seconds, I promise I'll stop talking. There's a wonderful company that no one's ever heard of in St. Louis, Missouri called Barry Waymiller. You can Google it. Their CEO, Bob Chapman, wrote a book called Truly Human Leadership. And they have these appreciations in, they own, I don't know, about 100 different small businesses in manufacturing. And they'll close the plant, have people vote on who improved their life the most in the last year. Not who was most productive, who was a great colleague, who improved your life the most. Oh, what an interesting question, right? So again, that's that work-life integration, not just that you were an excellent colleague. You actually improved my life. Wow, that's a great question. Again, listeners don't have to use that, but think about that broader notion of what human beings as social creatures need to feel like they're having an impact on the planet. And we crave that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think even that distinction between thinking of the people you work with as human capital versus human beings, and just even if you didn't want to say I love you or anything else, but what often happens to people is that they're not seen, in the sense that they're not seen as humans. They're seen as some sort of cog in the wheel type thing. Now, I meet a lot of busy managers and that, and in some cases they genuinely are very busy, and in some case, and part of that is where their priorities lie. And some of them have become so conditioned to the fact that people come and go, they're there to work for me, I'm not there to nurse them, I'm not their parents, etc., right? And yet they're missing something very important about what it's like. And actually, if you say to those people, would that be okay in your private life? They say, oh, no, I want my children to hug me, and I want my wife or my husband to be nice to me and tell me nice things, all these things. Now, I have a few questions coming up for you, because, and I apologize in advance if I play a little bit devil's advocate on one or two of these, but so let's get this idea of paying attention. And I'm thinking actually about something you said about people returning to work. If I look at my two older daughters, one of whom had a small work experience in a shop, but she went off and did her master's degree and now is working for a huge, successful company. And she never worked in an office because she went off and did her studies. And there's maybe even young people going out there, even just for the first time, trying to go, what's this thing about working in an office? So that's coming up. But I wanted to know, because of the younger generation, we have these crazy devices. One of the things I teach sometimes what's often dressed up as time management courses, and I say there's no such thing, because it's a question of where you put your attention and your focus and how well you manage your energy within blocks of time. And by the way, switch all the notifications off on your phones and that. But there are more and more studies emerging where it seems as though people are just becoming addicted to something happening, and if it's not happening, so how do you reconcile, or what advice do you give to people either in organizations or individuals listening to this who go, I've got messages popping up all day? How are they going to reprogram or refocus themselves? Because all that research that shows when we get interrupted in a focus task, it takes whatever it is, 5, 10, 15, 17 minutes or whatever I think I saw maybe in your book, to get back into that flow, that state. So how are people going to deal with that competing technology?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm not an expert. I give you 3 suggestions from the neuroscience. And one of those comes from another famous colleague I had at Claremont Graduate University, Peter Drucker, who passed away about 10 years ago. And Peter, in the 1960s, coined the word knowledge worker, which is so far ahead of the curve. And he said, if you're a knowledge worker, you need to be your own CEO. If you're your own CEO, you can say yes and no. So Peter also suggested that every person and every organization annually make a do not do list. Right? So I do that every year. I do it actually more often. I say no to a lot of things so that I can maintain my focus. So that's the first thing. And some of that is stuff that seems weird. So I don't go to movies very often. I decided in the year 2000 not to listen to new music. In the year 2000, which I had a daughter born then, I decided to stop watching sports. I just don't want to spend 3 hours sitting on my butt, right? And I'm a weirdo, I know, but I'm super productive, and I get so much satisfaction from producing stuff that's technical and creative that I like. It's much more than watching sports. So yeah, if you want to talk about football or baseball, I have no frickin' idea on purpose, right? So that's the first thing. The second is make it important. So this is right out of work from on exercising. So again, your brain's an organ just like your muscle. So it wants to be exercised and then recover, exercise and recover. So I put in that exercise, just like I exercise in the gym, that's on my calendar. It's sacrosanct, right? Occasionally, yesterday, I actually did a Zoom to Ireland from the gym because of the time zone difference. But anyway, I told them, I'm all sweaty. I'm in the middle of my workout. I'm going to do a Zoom with you. But apologies for the clanking noise in the background. But God damn it, I'm going to the gym, right? That's important to me. So I book out research time, 2 hours every morning for myself. Research, writing. I don't do email. I agree with you, Jerry. I shut it off. I get no notifications. My phone is off. I'm going to be focused. Now, after that 2 hours, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to see my dog. I'm going to get a drink. But for those 2 hours, my door's closed. Unless it's an emergency or something, I'm not going to take calls. So just like working out, you can schedule it and just make it important and block it out in your calendar. So literally, I use Google Calendar from 10 to 12 every morning for the rest of life. It's blocked out for research. Now, again, I can choose to violate that if I need to, if there's some emergency or whatever. But think about scheduling that. And then I think the third suggestion, if I may, is think about ways that allow your brain to get into these states. So we know the kind of immersive state. What we know is that having a goal is very important. So if I just have research, brainstorm, by the way, just daydreaming is also important. Walking is great for that. But just knowing what that goal is helps focus what I'm going to do with that time that I blocked out. So just have that list. And so again, very Peter Drucker, it's a triage list. What is my most important goal today? Right?
Yeah.
And there was a book, I'm going to forget the title, but this was it was in Bob Iger's wonderful book, by the way, just a former CEO of Disney, just stepped down. I recommend it very highly. It's wonderfully written. I mean, he didn't write it. Someone wrote it for him. But he tells this story of, he was at ABC and then Disney for years and years and years, and then coming in as, being anointed to be the CEO of Disney, huge job. And it was Iger who bought the George Lucas, the Star Wars universe. He bought what's the other property they have? The other Marvel or
Did they own Pixar?
Yeah, they bought Pixar and then they bought more. So he made three giant acquisitions, way extended, leveraged Disney. So anyway, he was coming into his first board meeting as CEO, and he had a list of 21 priorities. And he had an advisor who is a friend of mine that I'm not going to mention, but he's mentioned in the book, only because it's less than transparent in the book. But anyway, he had an advisor who told him 21's too much. 3 is the most, and 2 is even better. So think about that for your own priority list. If you're going to go, because we all, as you said, Jerry, we all want to be productive. We all want to make sure that our colleagues know how much we're doing. And if my list today is 21 things long, or even my weekly list, ain't no way I'm doing that, or I'm not doing it well, or I'm not doing it with reasonable work-life integration. So think just the top 2 or 3 things you've got to do today, order them, check them off, get that good feeling. I did this my most important thing I'm doing today is talking to you, Jerry. So awesome. I'm going to check that off my list. Right. And so I mean, just have that kind of triage. So I think people who are very busy but are less organized have a very big list, but it's not organized by priority. So think about that priority, and you can do that in 5 minutes. Some people, I don't have time. I got a big list. I know. That's fine. So tear off the bottom, save those for other things, or throw it away. Actually, that's the do not do list. Someone else can do that. What's the best use of your time personally or for your organization? Think about that focus. And then we're going to come back to, again, I'm sorry for the long answer, Sherry, but there's such good questions. Going back to the office. So some of this I can do by myself. I can work with my team. I can have a Zoom with them, whatever. But what we see at work is those unexpected collisions that lead to interesting conversations. So creating time for that also is important, to schedule that. That's where a lot of innovation comes from. Yeah. And also, it's just enjoyable. So my team is all diverse, and like everybody else, we've been more or less on lockdown. And we had a happy hour in person a couple of weeks ago. Man, did we have fun. We laughed and we drank. And then you know what? After about an hour, we started talking about work. And we solved 14 problems I didn't even know were problems. So just stuff we were kind of thinking about. You think about doing that with that. I'm like, oh, I've been thinking about this for a month. I couldn't figure out how to do that. I'm like, oh yeah, if you just connect these two things, like, oh, holy crap, that was great. So whatever. So I paid for the happy hour. So whatever I paid for the happy hour was worth it for sure in that one solution, and I found 13 other solutions. So think about that investment in relationship is so important.
Yeah, and I think what happens to a lot of people is that they don't have a concept of this kind of most important task in the morning, and that should be linked. If you ask yourself, why am I doing this and why is it so important, automatically some sort of a goal has to come out of somewhere. But what people often do then is, instead of doing that, they let the world happen to them. And so you say, what are you going to do today? And what happens is they kind of go, I'll wait and see what's in my inbox. And inboxes they have an amazing ability to control the world. Now, taking all of that, I've seen organizations now start to take account of some of these factors. Like, for example, I was working with certain people during this pandemic where they just seemed to jump into one meeting after another. Now, I know of one organization, they've curtailed the meetings. The calendars can only book 25 or 50-minute meetings. So they have a little bit of buffer time on that. So what can organizational people do to allow people the space, etc., and encourage people to take these steps, like you talked about, blocking out time and that, to get immersed in their work? So what are some of the things that you've seen organizations starting to explore, or that that really works to help this and facilitate this? Because if people are locked into rules in an organization where you have to respond to your boss within an hour, or you have to be on call, or etc., or this or that, or we always have to have the morning meeting. So they go, I can't block out 2 hours in the Monday morning because I always have the staff meeting, which I don't like and I don't enjoy. So what are some of the things that people can start to do at the organizational level or department level, where you can start experimenting with things which seem to work really well for creating more generative teams, where at the end of the week people have produced more and they've done it individually and together, and everybody can celebrate?
Yeah, two suggestions. We could spend an hour on that, Jerry, and I know you have a lot of experience in this area as well. One is that many organizations now have all meetings optional. All may be too strong. Almost all meetings. Maybe we want our quarterly town hall to be required just so there's information, but making meetings optional. If you're going to either create value from attending the meeting, or if you're going to get value from the meeting, you should be able to manage that. So if you're in a high trust organization, if you have autonomy, then you don't always know what you're going to get from a meeting. I can read the transcript faster than I can sit in the meeting, right? So make meetings optional. Number two, we are social creatures. We still need leaders. So even though I'm advocating for high performance organizations having a flatter management structure, we still need leaders. And so people will follow what leaders do, right? So in my company, we have our daily huddle. It's half an hour, and it's a quick stand-up around the room. And you can opt out anytime. Just Slack us and say, hey, I have something to do. I'm going to opt out. No downside. I think we're seeing this also in the no vacation restrictions that I think are becoming more common, particularly in the U.S. You want to take some personal days? Let us know. Make sure your team's on target. Do it. Right? Don't fill out a form. So super famously, Peter Drucker. This must have been in the 1950s or 60s. He worked for Sloan, the CEO of General Motors, and they had forms for everything. And the first thing he did, he asked, because they were just super inefficient, still are. But anyway, he had them get rid of all the forms. No more forms. We're going to start with zero. And they're like, oh my God, how can we live? For a week, we're going to go no forms, and we're going to add in only the forms they need. And they ended up cutting out like 80% of the forms they had, because General Motors had been around since, who knows, 1910 or something. So in 50 years, they had accumulated lots of forms because it's a big company. So, just think about the paperwork you can get rid of. So concrete example, a lot of companies in the U.S. now empower employees to spend company money, for things they need up to a limit without permission. Right. So if you need something up to $1,000, first of all, please check, see if we have that thing already. Make a call, look in the inventory. If you need it, buy it. Don't have to fill out a form, talk to your supervisor, get a purchase order. Buy the damn thing. Think how many hours you would save of everybody's time if you can just buy it. So I think it's thinking about efficiency, but that's also in a high trust organization. And just to be clear, high trust does not mean accountability. When you have autonomy, you own that process, and we're going to have a discussion. So I see you, your manager, see you spending $999 every month for, I don't know, weird crap that I don't think we need. We have to have a conversation. So again, autonomy doesn't mean I'm not monitoring you, right? So you're spending the max every month on snacks. I said, well, yeah, my team's in the field and they've been working 12-hour day. Okay, well, maybe there's a reason for that, right? Or maybe you just put them in your car and taking them home. I don't know. So again, certainly there's accountability here. But if I don't have to monitor this picayune level of detail, from a leadership perspective, I have just opened up a ton of bandwidth in my brain to the stuff that leaders need to do. Set strategy, pivot around processes, and all these things that can be sucked out of you. And it's probably the most important thing you can do as a leader.
In the final few minutes, Paul provides his top 3 tips for creating more immersive experiences, both in our private and working lives. Okay, so getting to the end. We could talk, I can see and I can hear, we could talk about this stuff for hours. And I'm pretty sure that our listeners out there could listen to you and all these wonderful things that you can educate them about. And maybe that's a great excuse for them to go to buy your new book, or even buy the other books that you've written. A couple of questions to finish. First one, very practical one. Have you got a publication date yet for the book, or approximately?
Summer, this coming summer 2022.
Great. Okay. And if there were a couple of tips now that you could give our listeners in terms of, getting really creating more space for themselves or their teams to experience this immersion effect. What would those couple of things that you could leave people with, really practical things that they could test out for themselves?
Shorter is almost more immersive. So cut the meetings down. Accenture, one of our long-term immersion clients, has found that no one should speak for more than 20 minutes and in person. And they find online it's more like 12 to 15. So short to the point, have an agenda, number one. Number two, if you're not sleeping well, if you're not eating well, you're taking bandwidth away. That's a stressor from the brain perspective. So work on that work-life balance. And then third, really empower your team to work to their own chronotype. So we have a lot of developers in our company. All the developers I've met are all night people, and they love working nights. That's okay by me. I'll do a check-in at 7 p.m. for 10 minutes and see how they're doing. And then they're going to work all night. And then when I get up at 5, I get a bunch of messages from them. So, allow people to be their best by helping create an environment where they can really flourish.
Right. And is there, how would somebody go about testing technology, the measurement technology?
They can go to getimmersion.com. You can put a piece of content up there and for free, and we'll give you a measurement of people's brains who are in our panel and tell you if it's good or bad. So meetings, training, marketing, advertising. I think one of the most interesting applications we're seeing now, Jerry, is in education. So, around the world, I'm sure where you are as well, everything kind of went virtual. Well, it turns out that virtual education can be really immersive if it's structured in a different way. Again, smaller chunks, more participatory. We're finding the same thing with corporate training. So I really was thinking about measurement as the key to creating more valuable environments, and then longer breaks. Accenture has found that working lunch is a bad idea. It just, people need a break. Not only are they not immersed during their lunch, they're actually not immersed in the session after lunch. They're just tired. You've just sucked, brain activity out of them. So give them a chance to recover. For students, it also means longer breaks, right? So if I'm giving you 5 minutes between Zoom classes, it's not enough, right? And it sounds like, well, that's just wasteful. Yes and no, right? It's wasteful, but it's recovery time. So I'm asking you to devote a lot of resources, just like working out. I need some recovery time. If you work out every day, you're gonna ruin those muscles. So same thing with the brain.
Yeah, and I think Einstein was famous for saying he got his best ideas in the 3 Bs, the bed, the bus, and the bath, and none of them were laboratories, because what happens is when the brain gets time to rest, it actually does a lot of great processing for us, and often that's where our insights start to. Anybody who wants to test this, go for a 15-minute walk deliberately now tomorrow at lunchtime when you've listened to this, or whatever your next working day is, even if it's only 15 minutes, and just find out just how you can come back with some great ideas, more energized. You get tons done that you might not have. You'll come back with that clarity sometimes you need to write that email that you were going to write before lunch or during lunch, and now you can write it better.
And I love the walking meeting.
Am I right?
I love the walking meeting too. We try to do once a month.
Oh, they're brilliant. Yeah,
let's just have that sit down huddle. Let's do a walking 30-minute huddle together, chit chat. And then I cheat because I incentivize people with, bagels and orange juice and coffee. So let's do a walking meeting, and then I'm going to buy breakfast for everybody. And some people will show up.
Okay, so I'm going to put some links in the show notes. How do people get in contact? What's the best way to contact you? LinkedIn or via the website? What do you prefer if people now want to reach out to you and connect?
Please do reach out. So I feel like I'm in your family now, Jerry. So LinkedIn's great. You can find me at getimmersion.com. You drop me an email there, and I'm happy to interact with anybody who's got questions. I'm still an educator, so I still teach, still run my lab. So happy to share whatever knowledge I've acquired with people who are interested. So, and Jerry, what a pleasure. So I'll give you my last tip, which is I try to end every conversation with the word service. I'm going to do the same thing with you. Thank you for this opportunity to spend time with you, and I want to be of service to you. So please call on me anytime I can help you, and I would be happy to do so.
Well, thanks for sharing all your research, for all your insights and your wisdom. And I hope that people listening to this got a little extra spark of oxytocin today, and they go away happier than they've ever been.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. You'll find details of what we covered in the show with links, etc. in the show notes. Please share your key takeaways from today's guest, and let your friends and colleagues know about the podcast. Oh, and if there's a particular author or leading thinker you'd like me to interview, just get in touch, and I'll do my best to get them on the show. This episode was brought to you by Wide Circle, helping you make better talent decisions. To learn more, visit widecircle.eu. That's WIDECIRCLE.eu. Until next time.